Hello guys, my name is Boston Pettit. I have been a traveling makeup artist in the haunted house industry for about 3 years now, and I'm here to give you guys a beginner tips sort of video to help you guys get started, and if you already airbrush, maybe help you a little bit along the way with some tips you didn't know. So the first thing we're going to go over is some of the supplies I use and why. This is probably my most popular question that I get surrounding what kind of paints I use, what airbrush I use, stuff like that. So I thought I'd go over that for you guys and not only let you know what I use, but why I use them, and maybe you can make that decision for yourself if you want to use the similar ones. The second thing we're going to go over is 5 things I personally wish I knew before I started airbrushing. About 3 years ago when I started, there wasn't a lot of media for airbrush and how to learn it. So I'm going to give you guys 5 tips that I think will help you avoid some of these mistakes that I've made so that you can be that much better of an artist without having to learn those mistakes yourself. Alright guys, it's time to talk supplies. Now this is easily the most popular question that I get across the board from people who are trying to start airbrush or people who are just genuinely curious what I recommend and what I use personally. The first tool that we will be going over is what airbrush do I use? Now here in my hands I have the Iwata Eclipse HPCS. Now I've been running this bad boy for about a year now and I really have enjoyed my time with it. Personally, I enjoy Iwatas. I've tried Pache airbrushes in the past, and I don't have anything against them. It's just for my uses, Iwata has worked a lot better. With both of these brands, you're really not going to get a bad airbrush. Pache makes amazing products, and if their functionality suits you, that works perfectly fine. I use Iwata because I prefer their top feeds just a little bit more. It's not saying that any one of them is better, they just have different pros and cons to them. So do a little bit of research and see which might work for you. I do only use top fill gravity feed designs. I like this because it allows for a lot more customization, and I really don't like to deal with all of the mini bottles and stuff like that. I just find it's a little clunky and doesn't really work into my workflow. Now, using a top feed airbrush, you do lose time in the fact that you have to clean out the cup every single time you want to change colors. But for me, this just works a lot better, and I would rather do that every time and lose that little bit of time than have my airbrush clog or the bottles and have a problem with that. The reason I say that is because with a top feed airbrush, when something goes wrong or something is clogged, I have only a very few amounts of the airbrush that are actually the fail points, so I have to check, is my cup clean, is my needle clogged, or is this front housing a little bit gunked up? With the bottles, you do run into problems where it can be, the nozzle on the bottle, it can be the actual hose running into the paint, it can be any of the air holes, stuff like that. I just don't like to mess with it too much. But if that works for you personally, that's great. You can do that. It does make color changes super quick. I just prefer this just a little bit more. That being said, if you don't want to go out and buy these expensive airbrush guns that can run you $100 to $200, you can do a lot with just a simple $20 airbrush. Harbor Freight sells airbrushes that are around $20 and are super good for that price. I would personally recommend, if you're getting into airbrushing, using those to start out. That's what I used. I went through 2 of them, and they help you a lot just to figure out what airbrushing is and how to get the muscle memory down without having to put $100 or $200 into it. The reason I personally have moved on to the more expensive guns is I just needed a little more consistency. While these Harbor Freight airbrushes are really great for the price, they do have some quality issues that just became a little too inconsistent for me. But if you do have the resources to buy a couple of them, or at least have a backup, if one does get really clogged or jammed or anything like that, you can just toss it out instead of having to tear it down and try to restore it to its original state. Whereas with these more expensive guns, if you do run into problems with that, you are going to want to take the time to completely tear it down and bring it back until it's usable again. Because like I said, you are spending $100, $200 on these, you're not going to just want to throw them away. The next supply I will tell you guys about is the air compressor that I use. Now personally, I use these cheap ones from Harbor Freight. I haven't really found a difference between these and some of the more expensive ones. It's not the quietest thing, but I don't really need that a whole lot. I don't really worry about that. So it works really well for my purpose. It's a pretty basic air compressor. You do still have control of the pressure and stuff, and that's really all I need from an air compressor. So definitely don't overthink these. If you buy a cheap one and it just doesn't work for you, that's fine. You can buy one of the more expensive ones. It's just not that important which one you get. You just want one that works well and is reliable. And these have lasted me forever. I've had this one for over a year and it has not quit on me yet. So, alright, let's get into the nitty-gritty. The most popular question I get is, what paint do I use? Personally, I use this hybrid mix from Olive Branch Skincare. Now, it isn't 100% alcohol, but I can tell you this stuff is a powerhouse. I will put this on an actor and it will stay on all night, sweat everything regardless. Plus, it's not a nightmare to get off, like some of the other brands I've tried. There are a lot of complaints that while it does work well and lasts you through the night, they don't really want to be wearing it the next week. So, this stuff comes off with just lathering soap and washing it off with water, or you can also use makeup wipes, and that works pretty well. I haven't run into any problems with this as far as not being completely alcohol based. It is mostly alcohol, but there is the hybrid element in there of some water based as well. I think these are great. They're very well pigmented, plus they run a little bit cheaper than some of the more expensive stuff on the market right now. With paint, there's generally not a ton of difference between all your different brands, whether it's Olive Branch, Endura, Pro Air. They are all great brands, and they, have their own functions and stuff like that. If you can afford the higher level stuff, that stuff is great and it will not come off, no matter what. Your actors could take a bath probably and it still won't come off. I just personally don't have the money and expense to buy a bunch of different paints at a premium price. The last supply I'm going to talk about is optional, but I thought I'd let you guys in on this. It's this bad boy. Now this houses all of my makeup when I'm traveling. It's super functional, and I love being able to store all of my stuff in a nice convenient case. It's on wheels, I can roll it around, I can pick it up with one hand, I can lug it around. It's just really nice to have one space that you can travel with all of your supplies. You might be set up at a haunt and not really have to move your supplies, but if it is a lot of your own products and stuff and you do want to move it to the haunt from your home or even to different haunts, this is really nice and convenient to be able to just set this down, open it up, pull out all your supplies, and have everything you need. This is a regular roll-around toolbox, and I got it from Walmart, I think. It's basically got just two big cavities inside here where I can put all of my stuff and stack it all neatly and just have it in one location. So these really can range. There's no specific things. I don't really like the regular makeup cases. I prefer, to have a toolbox because there's a lot more space and less like organized little boxes that I don't really have a use for. So this gives me a lot of customizability and a lot of function too. And that's going to wrap it up for basically all of the basic supplies I used. What I just showed you makes up about 80% of what I use on a normal job. There are some other stuff that I will use for specific different reasons, but I didn't want to show that in this entire video. That's just a lot more in-depth, and there's just a lot of stuff that you guys, might never use. So if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and comment down below, or just shoot me a message on Facebook or something, and I can answer those more specific questions.